What's going on, guys? Before this video starts, I just wanted to say sorry for the audio quality. I wasn't using the microphone I am now. I was using my headset microphone accidentally. So yeah, I just wanted to prepare you for the terrible audio. What's going on, guys? I'm JimTheKid, and today we're going to be talking about settings and what they do and how it can even make you better at the game. So the first things that we're going to be talking about are the performance settings, which when you open up the settings is the very first thing you will see. By default, yours is going to be on 1. I like to have mine lower for just because I get better performance, even though I get good performance at 1. You're going to want to leave the frame cap at 0, although some people do like to have their FPS capped. Like, for example, mine is at like 400 to 500 average, but if I were to set a frame cap and make it 170, if I wouldn't get killed. Yeah, see, it stays somewhere around that mark. But I don't really like the frame cap, so I'm going to leave it at 0. And by default, all of these options are going to be turned on. The first thing is low spec. Basically what low spec does is it makes characters not render their legs. So like, for example, if I can find somebody around this corner, you'll see that they don't have, see how they don't have legs. And it basically just makes the game run a little bit faster because they don't have to render the legs. And so the next thing is particles. So basically what particles are, if you see me shoot the wall, you see those little black things on it from where it hit the wall? Those are particles. If I go and turn particles off, then that never happens. And also you can change the particle distance, which I believe just allows the amount of particles that's on screen. And the next thing is shadows. Shadows is kind of fairly obvious. As you can see, I just prefer not to have them on because I get better performance and it doesn't really look that much better. But one thing I do like to keep on, however, is ambient shading. Like, you can see how the light looks. It looks really colorful and stuff, and it looks like there's depth to everything. If I go and turn ambient shading off, you can see it's kind of more drowned out. There's not really much depth in it. So that's something I really like to keep on. And bullet trails. Bullet trails basically are for the sniper, but if you see the bullets coming out of this gun, it's basically like that, except for the sniper. And yeah, I just keep it off because better performance, you know. In muzzle flash, you can see, you can't really see it now because I don't have my gun model enabled, but basically what muzzle flash does is it makes a fiery look come out of your gun, which can be very, very distracting to me. And this next one is sniper flap. So if I change to the sniper, just this is what the gun looks like. And so that's what the gun looks like. But then if I turn on sniper flap, you can see how there's this little cap on the end of the scope. And yeah, it's just nice, I guess, but I don't really prefer it. It's kind of pointless to me. And so, exit. The next thing is texture animations, which is basically just moving textures. If you don't know what textures are, it's basically the picture that's on the 3D models in the game that make it look like stuff. And texture animations is just where that moves. And object animations is like, for example, if there's grass in the game, the grass will be like swaying in the wind, or if there's fire on the new map, it'll kind of look like it's actually moving. I like to keep that off for better performance, and it doesn't really make a difference. And screen shake is basically where, like, when you get hit, or I think it's when you get really low in health, the screen kind of shakes a little bit. But this will throw off your aim, so I highly recommend keeping this off. And so the next things that we're going to go into is the interface. I like to keep my UI scale at around 0.7 to 0.4, but you can kind of read it better at 0.6 or 0.7. So yeah, and show UI, you definitely want to keep that on. It's, well, I mean, you don't have to, it's just useful to me to keep it on. And if you see here, there's no scoreboard at the top right, because Krunker changed that in a new update. But if you really like the old scoreboard like I do, you can just come down here right under Show UI to use uh, use old scoreboard, and that makes it look just like the game used to, which is really cool to me. And disable rarity animations, I don't have that on because I don't need it. And dynamic HP bars is basically where, let me see how you could see the white that's going with the red on their health bars. Basically, that's pointless and it can be distracting. Some people actually really like it and think it's helpful, but to me that's very distracting. So just experiment and see what you do better with. And use hit indicators. This is where when you hit, when numbers show up. So if I go around here and well, let me change weapons so I can actually do decent. As you can see, well, I thought there was going to be someone over here. Let's see, let's find someone. I hear someone over here. And, oh, see those numbers that popped out before he was dead? That's basically what the hit indicators are. And, I just keep that on because I find it useful. And show damage, this is just where you see your health bar. That's fairly self-explanatory. And you can change the color of when you have a lot of damage or when there's damage, I guess. And you can change the scale, like so the size of it. I just leave that alone mostly. I just have all of these on except movement speed. One thing I think you're that's not on by default is show FPS. You're gonna want to enable this because as you can see in the top right corner where it displays my FPS and the thing below that is your ping. You're gonna want to see your FPS so you can know if you're lagging really bad or not. That's just really useful to have on. And you can change your speed offset by like X and Y offset, but I just leave that alone. Yeah. And so next you can excuse me. Next you can change your crosshair. What I highly recommend you do, or actually let me show you what it's like on default at first. As you can see there's this, well, as you could see there was that crosshair there that basically moved and stuff when you ran, and it's not very precise. So what I like to do is I like to change the crosshair to custom, and I like to change it to solid circle, but you can change it to cross, hollow circle, hollow square, solid square, any of that's fine. I just like to keep mine on solid circle. And so now you can see the crosshair is just a little red dot on the screen. And the reason I like to use red is because red and green are kind of the easiest colors for the eye to see. And even though green is actually the easiest, red has more contrast with the items on objects on Krunker. So basically you can see it easier than it, even if it was green. So yeah. And like if you want to, you can change it to cross. It actually have to die and then start back for. Well, yeah, I can show you now. Okay, so well, Yeah, it's not wanting to work, so I'm just gonna bring it back to solid circle. It'll probably work in just a minute. I don't know why it's not working. And you can change the size and, like I said, the color. And I highly recommend you click this button that says always show. This basically makes it so that the crosshair is always showing even if you're aiming down sight or not. It's kind of useful, especially for if you don't have weapon models, and especially it or no, if you don't have weapon models when you aim down sight, and especially if you have weapon models never rendering. And yeah, and you can change your sensitivity and stuff, and you just want to if you're using keyboard and mouse, this is where you change your sensitivity and stuff at. But if you're on controller, this is where you change it at and stuff. So that's useful to know if you're on controller, I guess. And here's streamer mode. So if you're a streamer or a content creator, as you can see in the top right corner, it basically scrambles the letters in the names so that if somebody has something inappropriate, won't be, it won't seem that way, which I mean is really useful because you don't want to get like I don't even know, you just don't want inappropriate stuff in your videos. And this is stuff for your view model. I like to keep my field of view very low because it makes objects look bigger. The only thing is your peripheral vision will shrink. You have to keep that in mind. So there's a trade-off no matter which way. And so I just keep that mine at 65. You've already seen what mine looks like. So if I drag it up, for example, you can see my field of vision kind of grows. Like I can see more. But right, if I shrink it down, I also get the advantage of things looking bigger. So that's fairly useful. And weapon aim animation. Basically, what this is so if you see my weapon, how it has an animation when I aim. Basically, so if I turn this off, where's it at? There it is. When I aim, or actually when I aim, it doesn't have an animation. It just kind of zooms in. I'm actually gonna keep that the way it is because I don't use weapon models anyway. So where did I? Okay, hold on. Hide what? Okay, whatever. Hide weapon on ADS. I like to keep this on because when you aim down sight, it'll basically make it where your weapon model is no longer there. So like if you like to have your skins on, for example, it makes it where you can still see your skin and aim down sight. But however, I like to keep my weapon model off at all times, and I actually have that keybind done to a hotkey so I can use the scroll wheel of my mouse and to see my weapon or not. Because it's easy for me to remember, and like if I just want to see a skin for a minute, then I can. And so I like to show secondary. I don't know why I don't have that on, but I don't like to have show primary on, and I like to have show hands off. And this is where you can change the saturation and stuff, like for your UI and stuff. If you don't know what saturation is, it basically affects the color of the game. It affects how strong the color is. So you can see, like right now, it's really low, and by default, it's actually kind of pretty low in the game. I like to keep that up, and it makes the game just look a lot more vibrant. And so yeah, this is customization where you can do stuff like load mods, auto load mods. But one thing that's going to be turned on by default that you really should turn off is scope borders. This basically makes it so that, hold on, I'll show you. You see, like when I aim down the scope, there's these borders. You can only see this little circle where the scope is. If I go ahead and, where's it at? Okay, we need to scroll down. If there we go. If I turn that off, however, there will be no blackness around it. You can see everywhere. Something I do recommend you do is just search it up on Google, scope image, PNG, Krunker, and just click on it. Or actually right click on it, and then you'll want to click copy image URL, and then Krunker you can't actually copy and paste with your mouse, so you're just going to want to click in it, and then you're going to click Control V, and that will copy paste it and stuff like that. You just do the same for the hit marker image and the other stuff that's exactly the same. Um, Something that you should keep on is unlimited FPS. Like we talked about the frame cap. If you do not have this enabled, it'll basically make it where you're stuck at 60 FPS at all times, which is not good. You want higher FPS because it allows you to slide hop better in the game. Not necessarily better, but easier, kind of. Um, we're just gonna. And one last thing that is the volume of the game. You're gonna want to kind of just turn this down because by default, it's really loud. I'm not gonna show you because it's very self-explanatory, but by default, it's really really loud. So you're just gonna want to turn that down. So yeah, that's been the video. So bye.